So at the last second, Tyler Kasak ended up not competing at the U20 World Team Trials. Seems like an innocent bit of news, but it actually has bigger implications than just that.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Could Tyler Kasak be moving to 157 pounds for Penn State? This is Locked On Nittany Lions. I'm your host, Zack Seyko, and thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Joe Smeltzer is back, Nittany Sports Now beat reporter for football recruiting, men's basketball, and for the sake of this conversation, most importantly, wrestling. You can find all of his work at nittanysportsnow.com. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Joe, Tyler Kasak does not wrestle at the U20 tournament for the World Team Trials. Penn State has 5 wrestlers associated with the program. 4 of them commits, one of them currently with the program, that are going to represent the United States at the World Championships for 2024. Potentially Mitchell Messenbrink as well, if he decides to take them up on that. So potentially 6 overall, but the 5 that did win at the World Team Trials. We're going to discuss them in the final 2 segments. But Kasak, what's interesting about this, Joe, is there is a rumor going around. Pat Minio, who covers a lot of wrestling, has brought this up. And from what I've gathered is that Kasak didn't make weight at the World Team Trials. So 70 kilos is give or take 154 pounds. Joe, if we do a little bit of basic math here, is he making a move to 157 here where Levi Haines happens to be?
Yeah, it definitely seems like a possibility, and thanks for having me on as always, Zach. But
of course,
we've been talking since the season ended, Penn State season ended, about the possibility of Levi Haines redshirting what would be his junior year. And that's pretty crazy to think about, right? This is a guy who's a 2-time Big Ten champ, 2-time NCAA finalist, and of course, the reigning NCAA champ at 157. But there's benefits to redshirting in wrestling, obviously. We've kind of been seeing that. We'll see what Alex Facundo, who I think will start at 174. We'll see if that remains to be seen.
Right.
That remains to be seen. But the first we really saw of him after redshirting, he not only beat Levi Haines at the Olympic trials, but he dominated. He
did.
Shut him out 1-6-0, and then wrestles Jordan Burroughs, who's only the most decorated American wrestler in freestyle history, and he takes him down. He doesn't end up winning. Burroughs ends up taking control as everybody expected him to, but Facundo looked pretty good in that bout, and I think we really started to see the fruits of Alex Facundo's Olympic red shirt at the Olympic trials. Now, there's no Olympics next season, so if Haines redshirts, he'd be doing it for different purposes, but it's definitely a possibility, and I think there are benefits. Levi Haines' Olympic trials did not go the way he or anybody else wanted. I believe he lost both matches, the first one being to Facundo. So maybe he wants to take a year off. He knows he'll have time after coming out with that red shirt to come back to Penn State and dominate when Carter Starachi's gone and there's a little more room in the starting lineup. But yeah, that's definitely, I think if that's the course of action that Cale Sanderson and company takes, then you'll have Shane Van Ness and Tyler Kasak both in that starting lineup. And both of those guys were really 2 of the big stories among the people that didn't make it to national championship matches of the last 2 respective tournaments. Obviously, 2023, Van Ness has that big comeback early on and ends up making it to the semifinals where he falls to Yanni of Cornell, who was on his way to his 4th title. And then this season, Tyler Kasak losing his first bout and then reeling off 7 in a row. That's pretty close to being unheard of. Not that he finished in 3rd place, but the way he finished in 3rd place and the fortitude he showed to get to that point. But Penn State really has an embarrassment of riches, and it's it's crazy to say that a team could realistically redshirt a reigning national champion and be just
I
fine.
know, right?
That's kind of the spot Penn State's in. They're going to win a team title with
Yep.
or without Levi Haines in the fold. And Kill Sanderson wouldn't admit that publicly, but I think everybody knows it. So
This is where it gets interesting because it's who do you redshirt ultimately? I think either it ultimately depends on what the plan is, because if you redshirt Levi Haines, why? Because there is no Olympic team trials, as you mentioned. Yes, hypothetically, he could be looking towards Pan Ams, just focusing a little more on freestyle, maybe taking that collegiate season off. Jeff Byers has mentioned this before. It's ultimately what the wrestler would like to do. So if there is that flexibility to do it, why not? If what with Tyler Kasak, though, he was supposed to be the guy at 141 after Bo Bartlett. Injuries happen, takes over for Van Ness at 149. And Jeff Byers also mentioned this as well, that he was probably not going to stay at one of those lower weights. That Tyler Kasak, his build was going to allow him to grow into a heavier weight. So do you allow him that redshirt season to get it acclimated to a 157? But the writing is on the wall here. Bo Bartlett might have tipped his hand as well, because he was in the comment section. I think it was an Instagram post. And this is the kind of journalism that we do in 2024 here, Joe, right?
Yep.
And Bo Bartlett simply had 157 with the handshake emoji. And this is something that I pointed out on the show maybe a month ago or so. Oh, was Bo Bartlett alluding to a move to 157? No, because he doesn't have the build for it. So what could that have meant? I said it back then. Maybe he was referring to a teammate. Well, here we are a month later, writing on the post, writing on the wall, writing on the Instagram post. Makes a lot of sense here. Tyler Kasak to 157, but why Levi Haines? Eventually, what? Does he make a move to 174? Because we've talked about him bumping up to 165, but Mitchell Messenbrink's there. Mitchell Messenbrink can't redshirt either. He's already used his redshirt when he wasn't at Penn State. Right. So Levi Haines might be making a bigger weight change than what we're anticipating. This isn't a discussion about, Mitchell Messenbrink and Haines could flip-flop weights. This might be Haines bumping up 2 weight classes. Kasak can easily do this because he was already at 149, but now Haines, there might be bigger plans in store for him, literally and figuratively.
Yeah, I think, Zach, it would be, there's no guarantee that Levi Haines would be Penn State starter at 174, because look what happened when him and Alex Facundo went head-to-head. I think that Levi Haines has proven himself to be a better pound-for-pound wrestler than Alex Facundo, but he doesn't have the experience wrestling at 165 and wrestling at 174 that Facundo has. So I don't think it's a guarantee that he'd be Penn State's best option at 174 because of who is there and the move he would have to make to get to that weight class. But yeah, I think if Levi Haines doesn't redshirt, I think the smartest course of action would be for Levi to go up to 165 and for Messenbrink to go down to 157. If I had to guess right now, I still think that's the most likely outcome. But if Tyler Kasak goes up to 157, it's really interesting because if you remember when he came to Penn State, he was originally slated to start competing at 141. Then obviously we know Van Ness gets hurt, and that really shuffles the plans because somebody has to go in at 149. And I think we all knew from the beginning of the season that Kasak was going to be the guy to ultimately win that job. I think it was, I want to say, the Ohio State dual meet in early February where he officially submitted himself at 149 and burned that red shirt. But yeah, I think, I don't know about Levi going up to 174. I think there's just a lot of uncertainty there. And then theoretically, Carter Sirachi could remain at 174. I don't know how likely that is, but that's still definitely a possibility. But yeah, I think the two most likely things to happen would be for Levi to go up to 165, Messenbrink go down to 157, or for Haines to redshirt and then Kasak to go up to 157 and Shane Van Ness to reclaim his post at 149.
Well, and that's just it, Joe. That it gets a little for the short term. I agree with you. I mean, at the end of the day, Penn State's going to be either redshirting a gold medalist or a bronze medalist out of their lineup because you can't have Kasak and Haines sharing the 157 spot. Okay, and then you move Haines to 165. Then you have to bump Mitchell Messenbrink down. And Alex Facundo's back at 174, Carter Starachi at 184, 197. We truly don't know yet. I've given my opinion. You've given your opinion as far as where they should wrestle in other episodes. But I think that if you're going to redshirt Levi Haines, it's not just because. You don't do it just because. There has to be an ulterior motive here. And with no Olympic trials, and Levi Haines is so good that he can compete at the freestyle level. Like taking a season off just to focus on freestyle, it has to make sense in another way. And that's why I think maybe there could be a bigger weight change that we weren't anticipating here. Why move Kasak to 157 if you don't have a blueprint for Levi Haines? But there's plenty of other Penn State wrestlers to talk about because Penn State wrestling showed out at the U20 World Team Trials. 5 wrestlers won their respective weight classes and are going to represent the United States. We're going to talk about all 5 of them and what surprised us. Not a lot here, as we knew that the future was going to be brighter than ever for Penn State wrestling. And here it is as the present quickly approaches for them. We'll talk about that next, coming up. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. You got to download the Game Time app because buying tickets to your favorite events should not be stressful. The NBA Finals are in full swing. The Celtics lead the Mavericks 2-0. We'll see if they can come back, but nevertheless, it is very exciting to watch. But how cool would it be to go to one of those finals games? Game Time makes getting to the NBA Finals, getting those tickets even faster and easier. And get this, prices on the Game Time app actually go down as it gets closer to tip-off. So with killer last-minute deals, all-in pricing, views from your seats, and the lowest price guaranteed, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying those NBA tickets. And Game Time offers more than just NBA tickets. Well, to any sporting event, also concerts, comedy, theater, you name it, you can save up to 60% off of buying last-minute tickets to any of those events. Plus, you can take advantage of flash deals, save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of that game or the event. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets and so much more with the Game Time app. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account, use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So the 5 Penn State wrestlers that are going to represent the United States at the World Championships are as follows. Luke Lilledahl at 57 kilos, PJ Duke at 70 kilos, Zack Ryder at 79, 86 kilos, Josh Barr, and 92 kilos, Connor Mirasola. Joe, I mean, you and I have said this, Jeff Byers and I have said this. We've all agreed that the future of Penn State wrestling is brighter than ever. It's crazy to think the run that Cale Sanderson has been on with this regime, and it's only going to get better. And now the future is here in the present. Yes, when they're sophomores, juniors, and seniors at the collegiate level, it's going to get, all more enticing, but they're winning now. And they could bring home world championship medals to the United States. Nothing surprised me here at the end of the day, Joe. Nothing surprised me here. I figured that some of the other wrestlers, like we'd get a Nate Desmond versus Luke Lilledahl final, for example, like that. Or Tyler Kasak, if he had wrestled, right, it would have made for an interesting PJ Duke versus Kasak matchup. But for Connor Mirasola to win the way that he did, for Luke Lilledahl to win the way that he did, I expected guys like Bo Bassett, Marcus Blaze to do well. And those wrestlers are connected with the future of Penn State, potentially, right? I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but they're actively recruiting those wrestlers. And Penn State's, in the thick of it, right? But the 5 that are currently associated there, and the way that they did it too, I think the biggest victory of all of them, the best 2 out of 3 series, was Zack Ryder defeating current Iowa wrestler Gabe Arnold the way that he did. Like, there we go. You have someone who competed in his freshman season, his first year at Iowa, and then Zack Ryder, the high school commit, defeats everything's all good here for the future, right? That
Yeah.
nobody else is having that kind of success right now. It's not even close, Joe.
Yeah.
It's just not even close.
Absolutely, and the wrestling world is talking about, and let's face it, most of the outside wrestling world wants Penn State to slow down because it's getting you want to watch the NCAA championships not knowing what team's going to win, and I think it's at a point where what's good for college wrestling might not be so good for Penn State, and vice versa. And of course, that leads into the hiring of David Taylor at Oklahoma State and what effect that might have. But to play devil's advocate a little bit, because a lot of people are
Sure.
bringing up the possibility, if not outright predicting, that this is going to lead to the fall of the Penn State Empire. But to play devil's advocate, that means that if David Taylor does a good job at Oklahoma State and lives up to the hype, Penn State can't get complacent either. And Kale's going to continue to be, that's just going to be a motivator for Kale and the staff too, to keep this thing going. So, but that's a few years down the road. Talking about currently, I'm glad you mentioned Zack Ryder's win over Gabe Arnold, because
absolutely, yeah.
If Gabe Arnold had started last season for Iowa, I think he would have been Iowa's best option at 184. And one of the better performers on that team. He beat I think multiple ranked wrestlers. I believe if Tom Brand sent him out against Penn State, against probably Bernie Truex, Arnold wrestled 174 and 184. But if he was going to wrestle against Penn State, he wasn't going to beat Carter Sirachi. So I think the smartest thing would have been to have him go against Truex. And I'm not saying he would have beat Bernie Truex, who was obviously a lot more experienced, multi-time All-American, placed in the top 5 at Nationals a few months later. But if Arnold had wrestled Bernie Truex in Iowa City, he would have given them a match. And I'm not ruling out that Gabe Arnold would have beat Bernie Truex. I think he was Iowa's best wrestler at 184. He could have wrestled 174 too, but I understand that a red shirt in college wrestling is a lot more valuable than it is in other sports, because most wrestlers use all their eligibility, so you want to maximize that. But going to Zack Ryder, him beating Arnold 2 straight matches, the second one in dominating fashion. And then I want to hit on the post-match interview, because this is kind of the beauty of covering wrestling compared to other sports. Because to use that analogy, in football, Jalen Reed probably isn't going to circle back to something Chris Olave said about Penn State in 2022. And for that matter, Chris Olave wouldn't say anything noteworthy about Penn State in 2022. But Gabe Arnold called out Carter Sirachi while he was still wrestling, while Arnold was still wrestling in high school, and Sirachi had already won multiple national titles. Sirachi fired back, and while all this was going on, Zack Ryder was still a junior in high school. But after beating Gabe Arnold, he remembered that and was sure to make note of it in his post-match interview. So, as buttoned down as Penn State is, relatively speaking, when it comes to talking with the media, and that's starting with Cale Sanderson, you're still going to get some guys that say some interesting things about their opponents. Carter Sirachi has kind of made that an art form, and I don't know if Zack Ryder is going to quite get to Carter's level with the trash talk, but he definitely had things to say about Gabe Arnold, and he let everybody know that wrestlers don't forget, right? Wrestlers don't forget who they lose to. Wrestlers don't forget who says stuff about them, or in this case, who says stuff about their friends and teammates. And that's just something that makes covering wrestling it makes covering wrestling fun, more fun, I'll put it that way. And obviously every sport has its benefits, but this is stuff you don't really get in college football, college basketball, etc. But talking about Zack Ryder specifically, he's a guy that kind of gets lost in the shuffle, right? You hear about Lilledahl, PJ Duke, etc., Mirasola, etc. But
any of them,
it's kind of easy to forget a guy like Zack Ryder. But Zack Ryder is going to be a problem in the years ahead, and I think he made note of that while still not even on campus at Penn State yet. He beat who I think is already one of Iowa's top wrestlers and has national championship material. A guy in Gabe Arnold, he really beat him in the second match, didn't have much of a problem. So Zack Ryder is definitely one to watch.
Out of any of them, I mean, the future of Penn State wrestling could not be any brighter. I have to continue to state that to the audience or anybody that's just tuning in for this episode. If you don't know, now you know, because that's 50% of the lineup that's going to be at the World Championships. Now, still to come, let's talk about Josh Barr. Let's talk about Connor Mirasola and Luke Lilledahl a little further, as we've mentioned them, but they also had incredible performances as well to go along with what Zack Ryder did. That's coming up next. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Summertime means baseball. Summertime means NBA Finals and so much more. And you can bet on all of it on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets. That is right, $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. You can turn $5 into 200. That's $200 to use to bet on anything from Finals MVP to who's going to hit one out of the ballpark. And all you got to do is visit FanDuel.com/locked on and add a big win to your summer bucket list. That is FanDuel.com. And right now, if you look on FanDuel.com, you can see Game 3's lines for the Boston Celtics and Dallas Mavericks. Currently, the Mavericks are a 1.5-point favorite going into Game 3 with a -126 money line and the total set at 213. If you like those lines, you can bet them now at FanDuel.com/locked on. That's FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So, Joe, let's try to succinctly recap the other four wrestlers here. And again, Mitchell Messenbrink could take that spot if he really wanted to, since he did win at the U.S. Open, competed at the Olympic trials. But he would be the wrestler at the World Team Trials if he did do that if he chose to do that in this final segment. I mean, you could start with any of them. I think to just kind of briefly summarize everything, I like the fight in Josh Barr. Josh Barr, finished runner-up and everything. It's like, oh, is he as good? Should he be the odd man out with the lineup shuffle at the heavier weights between 74, 84, 97? And I understand, but Josh Barr, Aiden Sinclair is a very good wrestler. And for Josh Barr, it went to 3 matches, and that's fine. But Josh Barr taking care of business the way that he should in that third and final match. And the same thing, I think Connor Mirasola impressed me the most. I don't try to say these things lightly, Joe. I don't try to talk about Luke Lilledahl and just casually throw out, hey, he could be a 3-time, maybe even a 4-time national champion. Same thing with Connor Mirasola. He could be a 3-time or a 4-time national champion. I'm not saying that just to be a sensationalist. I legitimately mean that. I truly mean that, because when you watch Mirasola win 6-0 and then 10-0 in a tech fall against Ohio State's Ryder Rogotsky, who was ranked this past season at the collegiate level. If you are doing that as a senior in high school, what potential can you have in the future? Again, this is on the national stage. Essentially treat these as an early preview of the national championships over the next 2, 3, 4 years. So if Connor Mirasola, Luke Lilledahl, PJ Duke, right, any of them are doing this now at nationals and then ultimately worlds, what does that mean for NCAAs?
Yeah, it's scary to think about, right? I don't think that's
not for us.
Yeah, I don't think it's hyperbole at all for Lilledahl or Mirasola. I think both of those guys had the potential to go down as two of the greatest in Penn State wrestling history when all is said and done. I think the most telling thing about Mirasola, and he's been on fire since the Olympic trials, and at the trials, he did something that not only no other NCAA wrestler did the whole season, and something that I don't think anybody else at the trials did, and that includes Zahid Valencia and David Taylor. He took down Aaron Brooks, right? And that is just something that a high school kid should not do. A guy that
high school kid.
Guy that's an Olympic qualifier, has I think a very good chance to be an Olympic medalist in a few months. And Connor Mirasola took that guy down. And as you said, you mentioned the win over Rogotsky. I keep thinking about Lilledahl at the U.S. Open, shutting out Vinny Calcari of Ohio State. I think it was 10-0, maybe even more outside than that. And Calcari's a guy that frankly deserved to beat Braden Davis last February and was,
Mhm.
we'll just say what it was. He was robbed in that match, but we don't have to go back down that road. But the point is, Kalkiri is very good, already a pretty darn
Yes, he
good
is.
college wrestler, and Lilledahl is just graduated from high school, and he mopped the floor with him. And what does that mean for the rest of the Big Ten and a lot of other guys around the country? Assuming, and I think we both are expecting Lilledahl to start right away at 125, and we'll see what happens with
Yes.
123, whether that's Aaron Nagao or Braden Davis. So that remains to be seen. But I think you could almost pencil in Lilledahl for 125 at this point, and then yeah, just it's for Penn State's perspective, it's nice to see these guys just not really slow down in the freestyle season, because obviously they're coming off growing high school campaigns, right? They're getting ready for college. There's a lot that's on their minds. They wrestled in the trials too, and they're not slowing down, and it looks like these guys are just continuing to get better and better. And what they're going to look like in November is it's going to be fun. I'll say that.
And I don't want to leave PJ Duke out of this. Of course, Ryder, Lilledahl, Mirasola, Barr are all going to be actively wrestling for Penn State. And again, Lilledahl, we fully expect to be in the starting lineup at 125, depending on what Penn State does at the heavier weights, right? I think Mirasola should start right away. Some people would argue Josh Barr. Some people would even say put Zack Ryder at 174, move Carter Starachi to 97 and Alex Facundo to 184. And I feel like there's not really a wrong answer at the end of the day. But to wrap up with PJ Duke, if only Tyler Kasak, if the rumors are true, that he was not able to make weight and that he is trying to move towards 157. That's just the dynamics of it. You know, it's a few pounds, but if he is trying to really bump up there, 154 might have been a difficult cut. But at 154 pounds, 70 kilos, I would have loved to have seen, and I would have fully anticipated it had then the news came out that Kasak's not going to be in the tournament. PJ Duke versus Kasak would have been a lot of fun to watch. Like, that's like, get your popcorn ready. You are seeing inside the Penn State mat room on what it would look like on a day-to-day basis that fans, spectators will never get to see, right? Those wrestle-offs. And then you would have had that on the biggest stage in the United States at this given moment. Well, PJ Duke still handled business. If you look at the comments, they were split. People are like, hey, Kasak's really good. People are like, no, PJ Duke's the real deal. I would have sided with Kasak because he's more to the veteran. He's been training with the Penn State wrestling room. But at the end of the day, even though Kasak does not wrestle, I'm not trying to rob PJ Duke of anything. He's one of the 5 Penn State affiliated wrestlers that is moving on to the World Team Trials. And he's the number 1 ranked pound for pound wrestler in the class of 2025 for a reason, Joe.
Yeah, absolutely. And this guy is an absolute prodigy. We're talking about somebody who was winning high school aged tournaments back in the 8th grade. He's been at it for a while. Penn State has the luxury, not that this is a surprise, but the Lilledahl is number 1 pound for pound 2024. Duke number 1 2025, and yeah, both are coming. So this is what happens when you own the college wrestling world, is you get the top recruits routinely. And to be specific about PJ Duke, he was a New York State champion in the 7th grade. Not even the 8th grade, the 7th grade. That's just, you think about and I'm trying to think of how I want to phrase this. You think about how people were talking about LeBron James in basketball. That's what people are talking about with PJ Duke here, and he's a guy that I think if wrestling fans aren't following already, they should, because this is a guy that has he could get to that legendary status. He kind of has it written all over him. David Taylor was obviously a high school prodigy too, with 4 state championships, and that obviously carried over in the Penn State and then in the freestyle. Is PJ Duke cut from that cloth? I think he is, but I don't want to put too much pressure on the guy. This is still a 17-year-old kid that we're talking about. But yeah, it's an absolute embarrassment of riches, and I don't know. I think Kasak versus Duke would have been fun. I'll side with PJ Duke because of the upside. But yeah, I feel like we're gonna see that in some form soon enough. And you got to think about, if Penn State had a inter-squad scrimmage, like a wrestling blue-white scheduled for Rec Hall or the Bryce Jordan Center, I think they would sell out both of those buildings because that would be a show.
He is Joe Smeltzer, beat reporter for Nittany Sports, and now you can check out his work over at nittanysportsnow.com or on X if you want to follow him there as well for football, men's basketball, and wrestling. Joe, thanks so much for the time. As always, appreciate it. Any chance we get to talk some wrestling, especially in the off season here. But looking forward to what the future holds for more Penn State wrestling news. Thanks again.
You bet. Thanks, Zach.
And thanks so much for checking out this episode of Locked On Nittany Lions. Be a part of the conversation down in the comments section. Do you think Tyler Kasak is going to make the move to 157? What happens with Levi Haines? I want to know your thoughts down in the comments section. If you like this episode, leave a like on it, share it with friends and family. And if you're not already, become an everydayer, subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams. And don't forget, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV Channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering each and every league. You can find Locked On Sports Today now available on YouTube and the free Fire TV Channels app.